The family meeting was called suddenly, the kind that came with forced smiles and unnecessary excitement. Chairs were pulled closer, teacups were filled, and everyone spoke at once, as if noise could hide the tension that always lived between us. I sat near the corner of the room, half shadowed by the curtain, watching familiar faces act unfamiliar, laughing too loudly, pretending everything was perfect. Mom cleared her throat. That was always the signal. She straightened her shawl, lifted her chin, and smiled in a way that demanded attention. "I have wonderful news," she said, her voice glowing with pride. "Your sister finally got the perfect house." The room reacted instantly. Applause broke out. Someone whistled. Questions flew across the room. Where is it? How big? How much did it cost? My sister lowered her eyes modestly, but the smile on her lips betrayed her enjoyment. This moment belonged to her, just like so many moments before. I smiled too. Already. I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. No one heard me. As the celebration continued, my mind drifted away from the room. I watched my mother's proud expression and felt something ache deep inside my chest. Not jealousy, not anger, but a familiar heaviness I had carried for years. It was the weight of knowing that this happiness had never been meant for me. I remembered the first time I learned to stay quiet. I was young, barely an adult, standing beside my sister while Mom praised her small achievements. When my turn came, Mom only said, "You're sensible, you'll be fine." That sentence followed me through life like a shadow. I watched my sister accept congratulations, hugs, and promises of help. I remembered how I learned early not to expect any of that. I became the one who adjusted, who sacrificed, who didn't complain. The one who smiled even when it hurt. "Isn't that amazing?" Mom said suddenly, looking in my direction. "Yes," I replied calmly, "it really is." My voice didn't shake. My smile didn't fade. Years of practice had taught me how to hide emotions behind politeness. Inside, memories lined up like ghosts late nights, unpaid dreams, moments when I needed support and learned to survive without it. The room buzzed with excitement, but I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if I were watching a story that no longer belonged to me. Mom continued talking, praising my sister's luck, her timing, her destiny. I leaned back slightly and breathed in. This wasn't the beginning of my pain. It was the beginning of the truth. And though no one noticed it yet, something had already shifted inside me, something quiet, steady, and unstoppable. Long before that family meeting, long before the applause and proud smiles, I had learned what it meant to disappear inside your own home. I was the elder daughter, the responsible one. That title came with silent rules. I was expected to understand, to compromise, to sacrifice without being asked. When money was short, my dreams were the first to be postponed. When problems appeared, I was the solution, not the concern. My sister, on the other hand, was protected like glass. I still remember the day I got my first job. I was nervous, excited, and proud. I handed my first salary to Mom without hesitation, believing it was my duty. She smiled, patted my head, and said, "This will help your sister so much. And not us, not you, just her." I told myself it was fine. When my sister failed an exam, the house went quiet with sympathy. When I failed, I was told to try harder. When she cried, the world stopped. When I cried, I learned to do it silently, in the bathroom, with the tap running so no one would hear. "You're strong," Mom always said. "You don't need help." At first, I took it as praise. Later, I realized it was permission for them to forget me. I watched my sister receive support. I never asked for any more. Tuition fees paid without question. Advice given freely. Dreams discussed at dinner tables where mine were never mentioned. I became the listener, the helper, the one who nodded and agreed. There were moments I wanted to speak up, moments when my chest burned with words I never said, but each time I swallowed them down, afraid of being called selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. So I stayed quiet. Silence became my second skin. Years passed, and that silence grew heavier. I worked longer hours, came home later, and slowly detached from the family I lived with. No one noticed, or maybe they did, and it was simply convenient not to ask. The final betrayal wasn't loud. It was small. One evening, I mentioned wanting to continue my studies. Mom looked distracted, barely listening. "Not now," she said. "Your sister needs support. You can wait." Something broke inside me that day. Not into pieces, but into clarity. I realized then that waiting was all I had ever done. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be chosen. Waiting for someone to ask how I was holding up. They never did. And in that quiet realization, I understood something painful but freeing. If I wanted a future, I would have to build it alone. That night, lying awake in the dark, I made a promise to myself when no one else heard. I would stop waiting. I would stop asking, and one day they would wonder how I did it without them. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There were no arguments, no slammed doors, no tears spilled in front of anyone. I packed my things quietly, folding my life into 2 small suitcases, and left behind a note that said nothing more than "I need space." No one tried to stop me. That silence hurt, but it also confirmed what I already knew. I was on my own now. The world outside was colder than I expected. My first room had thin walls and a leaking ceiling. At night, I could hear the city breathing cars, distant laughter, lives continuing without noticing mine. I worked whatever jobs I could find, often 2 at a time, sometimes 3. Mornings blurred into nights. Exhaustion became normal. There were days I wanted to give up, days when loneliness pressed so hard against my chest that breathing felt difficult. I celebrated birthdays alone, achievements alone, and failures even more alone. No one called to ask how I was surviving. I learned not to expect that call, but something strange happened in that loneliness. I grew. Without anyone's expectations weighing on me, I began to hear my own voice. I learned what I wanted, not what was expected of me. I studied at night after work, pushing my tired mind further than I thought possible. I failed exams, lost money, trusted the wrong people, but each mistake sharpened me. I stopped explaining myself. Silence became my shield. While my family continued their lives, discussing my sister's progress and plans, I was building something invisible. I didn't post about it. I didn't announce milestones. I learned that progress grows faster when it's not watched. Months turned into years. Slowly, opportunities appeared, small at first, then steadier, a better job. A project that succeeded, a door that opened because I had knocked on it long enough. I saved carefully, every coin a reminder that I owed my future to no one. There were moments I wanted to go back and say, "Look at me now," but I didn't. I realized something important during those years. Success doesn't need witnesses to be real. Strength doesn't need applause. Healing doesn't need permission. I became calm in a way I had never known before. Not happy all the time, but grounded, certain, unshakable. One night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I looked around and smiled. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, everything I had belonged to me. My choices, my struggles, my victories. That was when I understood. The silence they gave me wasn't empty. It was space, and in that space I had built power quietly, patiently, and without asking anyone for approval. They still didn't see me, but one day they would. The day I returned to my hometown, nothing seemed to have changed. The streets were the same, the trees still lined the sidewalks, and the familiar hum of life carried on as if I had never been away. But I had changed, quietly, profoundly, irreversibly. The family gathering was a small one, almost ordinary, yet it carried the familiar weight of unspoken comparisons. Mom's eyes sparkled with pride as she began, "Your sister, she has achieved so much. The perfect house, the perfect life." I smiled. A real, calm, unshakable smile, all readied. I murmured softly, though this time it wasn't a whisper of longing or resentment. It was the kind of smile that held a secret strength one they had never seen before. My sister glanced at me, her expression half curious, half arrogant. She hadn't noticed the quiet battles I had fought, the years of struggle she had never acknowledged. She assumed my life was as easy as it had always seemed, that I was still the obedient, invisible daughter. She was about to be proven wrong. I waited for the right moment. Patience had been my teacher, and time my ally. Finally, I spoke. "I moved into my own place last month. Fully paid, renovated, everything in place." Silence fell instantly. Conversations froze midair. Forks hovered over plates. The room had transformed from celebration to stunned disbelief in a matter of seconds. Mom's eyes widened. "You bought a house?" she asked, voice tight. "Yes," I said simply, no prideful boasting, no anger. Just fact, the truth, unadorned and undeniable, 2 years ago. I've kept it private because it was mine to build, not for anyone else to approve. My sister's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She had always thrived on attention, on validation. Now the very thing she sought the acknowledgement slipped from her grasp. She could not clap, could not cheer, could not erase the years she had underestimated me. I didn't wait for explanations or apologies. I didn't crave their approval. Instead, I walked calmly to the door, turning back only once. "I'm not upset," I said softly, almost kindly. "I just learned how to love myself quietly," and then I left. Revenge, I realized, was not in proving them wrong through anger or confrontation. It was in showing them, silently, the life I had built without their recognition. Years of betrayal, neglect, and favoritism had taught me one profound truth. The sweetest revenge is living well, living fully, and thriving in the very way they never imagined. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I smiled again. This time, it wasn't a smile of hurt. It was a smile of victory, quiet, unassailable, and beautifully mine. No words were needed. They would never forget it, and that was enough.